Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. This is a special two-part series Jack Schonely and I recorded with Virginia State Police pilots Jeff Bush and Brian Canada. This conversation highlights their heroic rescue mission that successfully saved 54 individuals from a hospital engulfed by flooding waters during Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene impacted the entire southeastern portion of the United States. During this series, we talk about the brave efforts of first responders during the storm and the role that helicopter aviation is playing in the response to natural disasters. This candid conversation explores the critical role of public safety aviation in disaster response, highlighting the personal experiences of rescuers as they navigated challenging weather conditions. Learn about the intricate decision-making process for launching the mission, the vital importance of communication and crew coordination, and the impressive integration of civil and military assets during the operation. We'll reflect on the challenges faced, the invaluable lessons learned, and the crucial support provided by aviation programs in life-saving scenarios. Additionally, we'll discuss community involvement and the contributions of private helicopters during disaster responses. Be sure to catch Lisa Gordon's captivating article that highlights this remarkable mission at verticalmag.com. Get ready for an insightful episode that honors the dedication of our first responders and emphasizes the transformative power of aviation in saving lives. Thank you to our sponsors Airbus, Collins Aerospace Goodrich Hoist and Winch, and Technisonic.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
They're advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to the Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host, John Gray. Have a breaking news type podcast in store for today. As we all know, a major hurricane rolled through the southeastern portion of the United States. And when that hurricane rolled through, I just happened to be in South Carolina visiting my dad. He lives in the northwestern part of South Carolina, getting ready to go up to ECHO's Public Safety Aviation Conference, which was held in Richmond at the beginning of October. So I remember getting into South Carolina and reading the news, specifically the National Weather Service's forecast for the storm that was coming in. And I remember reading something that caught my attention. It said a once-in-a-generation storm. That's what the National Weather Service was forecasting. And the last time I remember that was in the end of February, beginning of March of 2023, when my community got buried in 10 feet of snow. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. You know, I'm in a place that I'm not familiar with in South Carolina. And to back up from that, South Carolina, and I think the area in general, had been receiving rain for at least the week prior to that, if not the 2 weeks prior to the storm. So the soil saturated with rain, and the creeks are already swollen, and in comes Hurricane Helene. And I'm awoken at 5 a.m. with water coming out of the ceiling in my dad's house. I'm like, that's not good. And the power's out. Get up and start attending to that. About an hour later, a tree comes crashing through the house. That definitely woke me up. I was up for the rest of the day. What I experienced in northwest South Carolina was nothing compared to what North Carolina was about to experience, specifically in the Chimney Rock and in that Asheville area. So our two guests come to us from the Virginia State Police, and they were heavily involved not only in the response to the hurricane, but in their own personal lives dealing with the aftermath of the hurricane. So I'm excited to talk about them, their careers, and their response to an incident that's very unique. You know, flying for the Virginia State Police, they were part of a rescue mission that took them outside of their state boundaries into East Tennessee specifically, and were a part of a rescue mission where they helped to rescue 54 folks off the top of a hospital that was being overrun with water. Prior to this recording, I watched a bunch of news videos that documented what was happening there. And man, it's wild. You know, they interviewed a lady who happened to be there visiting her mom when the floodwaters rose. And she says she's looking out the window and there's cars floating by the hospital. There's an airplane floating by the hospital. And her mom's in bed and she's unable to move. So she gets to the rooftop, and I guess eventually her mother did as well. So really interested to hear about the response and how you guys got involved in this. So to welcome you guys in the podcast, first, I'd like to thank Jack Schonely, our good co-host, for joining us. Jack, thank you for coming aboard.
Great to be here. Can't wait to talk to Jeff and Brian today and learn more about this rescue. It really is a very, very interesting, and it's courageous and represents everything we try and convey to our listeners about law enforcement aviation. Can't wait.
Jack, from your perspective from Oregon, I believe you were in when this thing rolled through. What were you hearing and seeing on the news?
The thing I remember is 3 days prior, or at least a couple days prior, a National Weather Service report that I saw on social media saying, "Get ready. This is going to be unprecedented amount of rain in a short time." And they were already talking about the mudslides and roads being out. This is days before it hit. And they were talking about eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, northern Georgia, and even into western Virginia. I mean, that whole circle, which we had just been through in May, by the way, on our Blades of Valor tour. A beautiful part of the country, one of the prettiest parts of the country I've ever been in. And I thought, wow, my sister's in North Georgia. I worried about that. And then when it hit, obviously it was very limited on information coming out because of power, and news crews couldn't get there. And but the one thing that popped up pretty quick was this rescue. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to Jeff and Brian today.
Yeah, the one thing I'll point out before I introduce Jeff and Brian is, these are the kind of incidents and situations that really highlights the capabilities of public safety aviation, in particular rotorcraft assets. This year coming up is the 20th anniversary of Katrina, and I think that was a highlight for our industry as well, pointing out and highlighting what we're capable of doing as a community, as a helicopter community, when we're needed. And this incident that just happened with Helene and then Milton afterwards also highlights that. These machines are incredible and save a lot of lives. With that, I'm excited to introduce Jeff and Brian, who were directly responsible for helping to save 54 folks. So Jeff and Brian, thank you for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, John and Jack, for having us. We're happy to talk helicopters at any point.
Yeah, I think anytime you put some folks in a room together that are pilots and have an interest in aviation, you know where the conversation is going to go.
Oh yeah.
So this is good stuff. So Jeff, can you start off by just introducing yourself, letting us know a little about yourself, a little bit about your background and what your current assignment is?
My name is Jeff Bush. I was a military brat, but Navy brat actually, but went to high school in Virginia. So spent most of my adult time in Virginia. Went through my first police academy in January of 94. Then went over to Richmond City in March of 98. March of 95. And then March of 98, I went to where I wanted to be, which was with the Virginia State Police. Was a road trooper, did motors for a little bit when the motors were still in the area working just like a road trooper. Did accident reconstruction. November of 03, went to BCI, our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, did fugitive work for about 7 years. Worked on my private pilot's license to be eligible for the aviation unit in 05. In 2010, I was offered a position at the Chesterfield base there in Richmond. Flew there for a couple of years. In the spring of 17, was promoted to the base supervisor at Chesterfield. And then in January of 18, I was promoted to the assistant division commander.
Wow.
Retired in July of 21. Went to fly with the airlines for about 13 months. And, my heart's always with the blue and gray of Virginia State Police. So they were changing the schedule for the med flight pilots and moving from a 24-hour shift to a 12-hour shift. Talked to my old boss. He said, I think they could use you in Abingdon talked with the supervisor there, John Ratliff, and worked out that I was going to work 2 12-hour shifts because I had moved to Asheville, North Carolina, which was a little less than 2 hours from Abingdon. So kind of worked out. And December of 22, December 5th was when I came back as a part-time wage employee pilot
Wow. Yeah.
for the department. So I'm now a civilian pilot, just part-time. So
That's cool. Are you still flying at the airlines?
I am not. Nope. I have this past August took a teaching position at our community college here, AB Tech. So I'm doing the ground school for the 141 program.
That's cool. On a side note, I feel like our industry is experiencing a lot of people leaving for the airline industry. And I think of, what we're used to responding to, incidents that are impactful, like what you guys did in that rescue mission. We're used to being part of those types of things. And I feel like it would be difficult to leave that mission set and go fly from point A to point B. What was your experience with that? And
I enjoyed it. Being with the department as long as I was, leave was not an issue. It's a state agency, so they don't pay as well, but you get a lot of benefits, and one of those is leave. So from going from basically having whatever leave I would like to 1 week out of the year, not knowing my schedule, being new and not having the seniority, I didn't really know my schedule until the 27th for that next month. And that was hard. I, didn't really enjoy that part. Flying a jet is a lot of fun. I did enjoy that. I did like the short hops. I like to be busy. I like doing things. Going from point A to point B is fun. But like you said, when you're in this business for so long, whether it's just law enforcement or aviation law enforcement, you get that mission mindset in your head, and it's hard to get out. So
yeah,
I am very happy that I was given the opportunity to come back and add to the mission. I hope I helped out the pilots in Abingdon with giving them some relief, at least 2 shifts a week. And I think that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
Brian could probably tell you he's ready to get rid of me or not. I don't know.
Hey, Jeff equals leave. So when you're working, I can be off.
There you go. There you go. So, but that mission mindset of helping people, like I said, whether you're in a uniform on the road, in the streets of Richmond City, or in a blue and gray on the highways around Richmond City, it was, I missed that mission set.
Yeah. Clay Lacey talks about it quite a bit. A lot of us have the itch to serve, and you've got to find a way to scratch that itch, and so to leave that and do something difficult. I'm thankful that after my retirement, I was able to join up with Vertical and continue to be a part of the community in a different way, but it's helpful, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear, Jeff, that you're able to get back to doing what you love, and you're contributing to the well-being of the citizens of Virginia and the region that you're a part of.
It has been a blessing. Thank you.
Brian, thanks again for joining us. If you could follow in Jeff's big shoes that he just laid before you, and
I won't give as many dates as Jeff did because I can't remember any dates. Personally, been married for almost 30 years. She's a real hero, and kind of what we do. And you all understand that. Got 2 grown children. They're successful. Just added a 5-month-old grandchild.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's number 1 for me. Thank you. Yeah. Moving on professionally, I joined the state police in order to, my goal was to end up in aviation. It was never to be a road trooper. I started in 2002, so I'm in my 22nd year, master trooper pilot. So I'm as high as you can go in the rank of trooper, non-supervisory. Then joined the state police in 2002, was a road trooper. I immediately started working on my private pilot license, as Jeff did, in order to, which is a requirement to transfer in their aviation. Was able to accomplish that pretty quick, and made it known to those around me, anybody that would listen, that my goal was to end up in aviation. I was a road trooper for about 6 years and loved it. Arrested enough people for you name it, I was involved in it, and enjoyed that. But my heart was always to get into aviation. And I think we'll talk about it later. We have what's called FLIR operators for police missions. Our Bell 407s are mounted, airplanes too, but that's another topic. When I got started, we had FLIRs on the 407 helicopters from Bell, and required a pilot and a FLIR operator. And I was able to do that prior to getting into aviation, which I think was important for folks to get to see me, know me, like me, hopefully, and got into aviation. I've been in aviation for, I guess, right at 16 years now.
Wow.
So I'm definitely the old guy amongst, we've got a lot of young talent, some really good young folks coming in, and we do a really good job of sharing experiences and growing together. But it is fun being an older guy getting to do it, because I get to tell stories about aircraft that some of these young guys, they'll have to Google it and say, well, what was that? What's a BOCOW? What's a BO-105?
Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety.
That's funny you say that, Brian, because yesterday's episode that came out was with Kevin Means, and he talked about being in the Navy in an H2, and I thought I knew what it was. Last night, after I listened to it, I looked up H2, and I went, oh, I know that aircraft, but I had to look it up because I couldn't picture it, because we're talking, he was in late 70s in the Navy working on that H2. And so I had just done what you just said. So none of us are immune from it, getting as time rolls on here and aircraft changes. But that's funny that the youngsters in your unit have to look some of that up.
Oh yeah, and very few people, even in we're the aviation division now. We're a completely separate division inside the state police, and that's been going on for, I guess, a couple of years now. I'm one of the few that flew unaided. You did, Jeff, I think.
Just a short time, yes.
Yes, so we flew medevac missions in the mountains unaided.
Wow.
Occasionally now, I will peek outside of the goggles at night, and I get scared enough to think, no thanks.
I was going to ask you, does it scare yourself? You scare yourself looking at it?
Yeah, no thanks.
No.
So anyway, my entire, to finish up, my entire career in aviation has been in Southwest Virginia, and I'm a little biased, but we've got the best base. A lot of it, of course, got really good people that I work with. The terrain that we live in a beautiful area, but with it comes a lot of challenges. We are not flatlanders out here. We got, give or take, about 3,000 foot elevation changes that we manage, which again creates challenges, weather, in addition to the terrain and managing that. So it's been really good to me. Overall, state police has been good to me.
I will say Virginia is one of the most beautiful states I've ever been through. I remember driving through for the first time on the way home from Washington, D.C., actually driving to my dad's house from Washington, D.C. went into the Shenandoah Valley. I'm like, holy cow, this is beautiful, and every part of the state I've been in is exactly that, beautiful. So really cool you guys get to be in that environment, fly in that environment, and experience the things that you guys do. I want to go back real quick, Brian, to what you touched on with your spouse, with your wife. 30 years is impressive. That's something they don't see in law enforcement a whole lot. So I love to hear those stories.
Right.
But you're 100% right when you talk about the spouses and what they provide for us, when we're gone working holidays and nights and doing all the things that we do. It takes a strong spouse to be a part of that and to stick around for 30 years. So congratulations. And I love hearing that. That's cool.
It just must be us because I'm at 31.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like aviation is the one kind of exception in law enforcement. A lot of folks are in that same boat. You see a lot of long-term marriages, which is pretty neat,
Didn't realize that.
Yeah. I mean, it's good, not everywhere, but from my experience, there's more long-term marriages in our, category than others.
I think it's the stability. I mean, you can only, for the most part in an aviation unit, when you're done for the day, you're done for the day. It's not like SWAT and K9 and detectives that are getting called up at 0300 to go in night after night. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more stable. It varies from unit to unit. I know where I worked, it was extremely stable. You never got called in because it was a big enough unit where you didn't have to. And I think that stability adds to that relationship at home with your spouse and with your kids. And that's one of the reasons I went from K9 to air support was the stability. And sure enough, it was true, and I'm thankful that I made that move.
Yeah. The quality of life too in aviation is so much better. I remember being a little angry, when I was working patrol towards the end and go to aviation, and it's a whole new world. Life's a little different, and kind of regained a little bit of who I was before. And so thankful for that and for the folks we work with. We work with some great people. So on that, sorry for the rabbit hole, but I think it's important to touch on the spouses and what they provide for us. They're a huge part of what we do and the missions that we're a part of. So
they are.
With that, I want to hop into the story of the rescue that you guys were a part of. I know you guys have been over the course of your career in many situations where you've been a part of impactful missions, but this one, obviously, based on the recency of it, is something that I want to talk about. So maybe, Jeff, we can start with you, and if you could just provide us with an overview of the mission and what was happening at that time.
So I came on work. The shifts change at 7. So I drove up from Asheville that morning, coming through the storm. It was okay, but it was definitely getting worse as the morning progressed. I can, depending on how much detail you want to go into. So somewhere about 10:30, my med flight crew for the day was April Boyd was the nurse and Wayne Carroll was the paramedic. They come on at different times, but definitely by, I think, 8 o'clock, everybody that's going to be on that shift is there for the day. And, going through the morning call at 8:30, finding out how the weather was all around, and just kind of talk to them and say, hey, look, I think later on in the day we should be okay to fly, but definitely not right now. So we were kind of just sitting around. I think I was eating breakfast. April had pulled up on some social media of a picture of the water coming into the hospital. And so, and I think that was about 10 o'clock. We kind of started talking about it, and me thinking about it, that because I drive right through that area to get to the hangar and then to get back home. And I was like, oh man, should I call a supervisor, have somebody else come in? Because I might not be able to get home.
Yeah. So
it progressed a little bit, and we had some stuff on the news on about 11:30 is when the valid flight comms had called and said, "Hey, are you guys available to fly, or can you fly? What's the weather?" And I said, "No, I can't go right now. Don't have the weather to do that."
Do you remember from either that moment or even prior in the morning what you were seeing as far as ceilings and visibility and wind gusts?
Come on now. I'm a state trooper. I've got it all printed out right here for you.
Bravo, Jeff.
Which one do you want to know?
This is experience right here.
So right at about that time, the METAR was winds were 160, 18, gusting to 28, variable between 120 and 190. I mean, yeah,
turbulent.
Jeez.
So they were shifting around a little bit. Visibility was 4 miles. It says light rain, 2,300 scattered, 2,900 overcast, 23 and 21 temperature dew point. So definitely not going out at that point.
Yeah.
Now the area that we're at, you kind of, to get to where this hospital was, you have to almost fly by Elizabethton to get to it. So that is the closest one that I could pull up any kind of METARs for. That one was pretty similar, except it was 24 gusting to 41, 3/4 of a mile, 300 broken, 3,100 overcast. So definitely not going out at that point. But when, they called and said, "Hey, we got people trapped at the hospital. We're trying to get out. Can you go?" And, basically I said, "No, I can't right now, but why don't you call back in an hour and I'll let you know what it is then." I'm thinking that that's really when it's going to start improving and maybe we can go.
What are your weather minimums, Jeff, for launching? What are you dealing with there?
For daytime, we fly under Part 91. So 1 mile and 500 is what we have for the unit.
Okay.
And, as some of you guys might know, a mile visibility is not very much when you're doing 120 knots.
That's right.
500 feet, I've had some missions at 10 miles visibility and 500 has been fine.
Yeah.
So, but
what about the wind? What winds is that a personal choice, or is there a specific written wind minimum for you or maximum?
Yeah. For me, and Brian can speak to his minimums. For me, if I'm on a med flight mission, it's what are the winds that the medics and the nurses can provide care.
Mm-hmm.
If it's gusting over 30, they're not going to be able to do very much care. So are we really helping that patient get to the hospital?
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where my threshold is for a police mission, which this was basically it. It can be a little bit higher, but it also depends on the crew. If they're comfortable with it, and I'm comfortable with it, and I'm willing to give it a try. So
gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, I just brought that up in our safety panel at the ECHO conference. You're talking about personal minimums. You obviously what you're comfortable with is much different. You've a lot of experience and you've flown in that area for quite a while. But even a new paramedic, new TFO or flare operator on board who maybe isn't familiar with gusting winds and the turbulence that comes with that, or some of the visibility restrictions that you're talking about, they may not be comfortable to the point where they're not able to do their mission to the level that they need to, and it becomes an ineffective platform at that point. So especially on the medical side, I like what you said. Imagine being a medic or a flight nurse in the back of an aircraft trying to set an IV, and you're getting bounced around and you're jabbing the patient. So I always encourage folks, if you're uncomfortable, let the pilot know, because if you're so uncomfortable that you're paying attention to the outside environment versus what you're dealing with inside, then you're ineffective. So love that you brought that up, Jeff. That's great.
Tracking, just on a side note, think about track and balance, and when they have an EKG hooked up, is what they're seeing on the EKG really what's going on with the person's heart, or is it the track and balance that's throwing them out? So we've made those decisions before too. So
yeah. Can you talk a little bit about you coming out of Asheville that morning? The storm's progressing. Can you talk about some of the unique geographical not situations, but you can talk about the geography of the area that you're a part of, and why the rain that fell caused these creeks to swell in the way they did.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
The rain here in Asheville started, I think, on Wednesday. And whether it was some outer bands of Helene at the time, it kind of, that was such a big storm that may have just been a different storm that was started on Wednesday. So rain started falling Wednesday, pretty heavy. I think it was Wednesday night when my wife got home. Our neighborhood, you have to cross a little creek to get into the neighborhood. And she was like, I'm a little worried at the creek. It's kind of up already. And of course, me being the optimist, I guess that I am, I was like, just don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Just think about how much water has to cover all those low fields to really cause any damage. And man, if I jinxed it, I surely did, because holy moly, when I left Friday morning, the creek, I wouldn't say it was overflowing its banks, but it was close. And it's still, to get over top of our bridge, you're probably talking another 10 feet. So it was a lot, if not 15. I mean, it was a lot. So on my way in, I kind of go around and through Asheville City, getting from one of the country highways onto the interstate. There was a tree down and the guys were clearing it, and I was delayed by 10 minutes. And I had woken up a little bit early and just said, I'm just going to head out now. So, and that was really my only problem. Going up over the mountain on 26, going through Unicoi and Irwin, and on up through Johnson City and into Bristol and then Abingdon. It really was just, okay, maybe a little wind at that point, but rain, that was it. But I think with we live around a bunch of what we call mountains, maybe not people out on the West Coast call mountains, but a couple thousand feet high, and everywhere has got a creek around here. So it all just funneled down. And I know there was one news report I heard maybe a week after the storm, somebody's surveillance camera caught their front yard. And if you watch the timestamp, it was 10 minutes where it was just starting to enter their front yard till it was over their porch and 5 feet,
Wow.
something like that. It was 10 minutes.
Wow,
So
that's amazing.
Just a lot of water all at once.
I'd like to get back when we're done talking about the Tennessee rescue and talk about the civilian response to the Asheville area and what you've witnessed there.
Sure.
Before we do that, can you talk about, and I don't know if you or Brian would be better for this, to talk about the initial request that came. You kind of brought it up already, and how that came, and then what decisions were made before you actually responded out there.
So when that first call came in at about 11:30, the MedFlight crew and myself started talking about it. How could we help? if we do have the weather and we get down there, how can we help? Can they get people to the roof? And at the time, we only knew that there was water coming into the hospital, and it looked, reasonable. Yes, it was water coming in, but we had no clue. I think maybe we had there may have been some news reports that it was starting to overtake the ER there. So anyways, the three of us, April, Wayne, and I, were talking about how can we help these people if we can get down there? Can they get to the roof? We were told, I don't know if it was it might have been the first call, that they were getting some rescue people there, fire and rescue people there, to help with boats and high water vehicles and things like that. So we started spitballing that a little bit. In the meantime, I called the on-call supervisor to give him a heads up and to start the whole approval process for us going down there, since it was in Tennessee. And I think probably 12:30ish is when I started looking at the weather again. And I called Brian. He was the on-call person to come in and do some rescues. My aircraft for that day was the EC-145. Brian was going to take the Bell 407. And so I had called Brian and said, hey, just a heads up, they called for this, working on, approvals and stuff. Don't have the weather yet, but I'll let you know. So a little while later, supervisor called back, said, yep, you guys are good to go when you have the weather. They, unfortunately, our hoists are under maintenance. So the only hoist we had, or the closest hoist we had, was in Lynchburg. So kind of gave them the heads up that maybe they were going to be needed. And then I think at 12:48 is when the Ballard flight comms had called back and said, what's the weather situation? Can you guys fly? And I was already at that point where I was going to say yes. And so that was an easy, quick decision once they called back.
Can you talk about the assets that would traditionally service that hospital and what their status was?
Brian may be able to answer better than I think. April said she's only been down there. That is within our service area, but I have not gotten down there to do any kind of med flights. April said that she had been there once or twice, maybe. I don't know, Brian, had you ever gone down to Unicoi?
I'd been one time. We're either second or third on the list as far as responding to that location, just because it's out of state and distance wise. So yeah, it's primarily just serviced by private helicopter services, medevac.
Okay.
And the state of Tennessee doesn't, to my knowledge, well, I know they don't. The state of Tennessee doesn't provide any type of medevac. So everything that's in Tennessee is private enterprise as far as medevac services.
Okay. How far is that hospital from your guys' base?
About 30 miles or so.
Okay.
35 maybe.
It's about a 20-minute flight from us.
Okay. And what's the terrain like as you respond out to the west?
It's pretty flat from where we go. We probably lose about 600 foot in elevation from Abingdon going into Tennessee. And I'm not exactly sure what the bed of Unicoi or Irwin is, but it's probably 600-700 feet less than where we are, and got some pretty good peaks around it. Right next to it, we talked about wind earlier. The wind can be your friend. And when you talk about the winds coming out of the south, where the terrain runs primarily southeast to northwest, that is not a friendly wind direction. essentially the wind is rolling right over top of those ridges, which wreaked havoc. Anytime you're below the ridge, you felt it, you knew it.
Yeah.
So essentially where the rescues were done, it was obviously a bowl. That's where the water ended up. And I'd guess at least 1,000-foot peaks or ridges on both sides, and an entrance from Virginia. There were no peaks. We didn't have to go over top of a peak. But right up against, we were essentially right at the base of the mountains that crawl over into North Carolina.
Brian, what did you deal with that morning before Jeff calls you? Are you dealing with a personal situation where you live? How close to the hangar are you? Was it difficult getting there? Get us up to the point where you're getting to the hangar personally and professionally getting there.
Well, in my room, I'm at home now. I was actually sitting in the recliner right behind me, probably in sweat shorts and a t-shirt. And I was on call, got a call from a supervisor a day or two ahead. I was actually on leave. We were talking about that earlier, I guess, before we started recording. I'm one of the older guys, got plenty of leave. So I was on leave, and my supervisor called and just asked if I wouldn't mind to be on standby. State of Virginia had moved assets to this corner of Virginia, or to the bases in advance, knowing that the potential was there. And we've done that for years and done a good job. Most of the time, we move the assets and don't need them. But anyway, they were here. We had the 2 helicopters at our base. I'm only about, which is good and bad, I'm about 5 minutes from the hangar.
That is good and bad, huh?
It is. Anyway, I knew I was on call. Jeff gave me a call that gave me a heads up. I had good time to go ahead and get ready, prepare myself, get a bite to eat and prepare myself mentally. As far as nothing was really affecting me. Y'all nailed it. We had received a lot of rain in this area over the previous several days. And then when the bands of rain were moving through, it did not surprise me that we had water issues, because it was dumping the rain. So at that point, power and roadways were not an issue in Virginia. Later, we got hammered in a small town just outside of Abingdon that received a lot of rain water damage. But at that point, pre-rescue, we weren't dealing with anything. Everything was pretty normal, just we were getting really wet. And the weather was rough, just looking out the window. I didn't have to check the METAR. I knew I wasn't flying. The trees, and it wasn't just the rain. The wind was stout. When the trees are big, mature trees are laying in every direction that they can, it was clear to me that that there were going to be power lines down, trees down. Anyway, it was nice. I was glad that Jeff was able to give me the heads up, and we did brief each other. We made a couple of quick phone calls with each other and kind of briefed the area. Of course, Jeff was familiar with it because he drives through there. I had been there once, just to this hospital at medevac-wise. So I was familiar with that hospital, where it was. Did I answer? I think that was all we needed.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you had an adventure just getting to the hangar, but being 5 minutes away was a nice thing there, that you could get there and supplement the mission with Jeff and his crew that were already there.
Jeff, you guys look out and you finally determine the right weather's there for you to respond. You guys make the decision to respond and you guys launch. Can you talk about that launch and the communications you had with the folks that were on top of the building, and what that coordination looked like, if you had some?
Thank you to our sponsor, Technisonic Communications. Technisonic Communications is a proud provider of the critical airborne communications equipment utilized every day on every mission. Law enforcement, EMS, forestry, federal and military operators all trust their communications to Technisonic. Visit TIL.ca to learn how Technisonic can support your mission communications.
During the call, the second call from Ballard, one of our new trooper pilots happened to be coming by the hangar, because we had talked about one of the medics going with me and one of them going with Brian, since we had the two helicopters. Jake showed up, Jake Culp, and so it was like, Jake, you want to come to work? He's like, sure. So we ended up sticking Jake with Brian. Jake was helping the medics. We had decided that we were going to use, I think Brian and I had talked about this before he came in, that we were going to use the 407 for all of the ambulatory people, and the 145 we would leave with the stretcher in it in case there were some patients that weren't. We could still take ambulatory patients, but then we also had the ability to put some people on the stretcher. So they were getting that ready. Brian was on his way in. We were topping off with fuel. We launched a little bit after, I think 1351 is when we launched. The winds getting down there were pretty, I like Brian's word, stout. You know, if you all are helicopter pilots, so you know when it's gusty and everything, you're not going to fly at whatever your max speed is. You're going to fly more at the maneuvering speed. So, you know, getting down there took a little bit longer, and you know, there was altitude changes of, you know, a couple hundred feet and speed changes of 20, 30 knots or so. So it was getting down there was a little challenging, I felt. As we go down the valley of Virginia towards Tennessee, around the mountain there at Elizabethton, and head more south towards Irwin and Unicoi, it kind of, you know, is like Brian said, all open. It's all flat basically there going through Johnson City. It was a breathtaking sight to round that mountain and get closer and just see the water from basically one side of this bowl to the other, and how much water was there. I was shocked. So I would, since Brian wasn't in yet, even though it only takes him a couple minutes, I got to the gas first and got topped off. So I was first to depart. I was only a couple minutes ahead of Brian. As we, and Brian did get to the hangar where we were able to talk a little bit about where it was we were going from the hospital to the high school. And of course, we were going to talk air to air on 123.025, and you know, our traffic pattern. We had talked about that a little bit. Had at that point, we were told that nobody else was able to get over the mountain to help out. So get to the hospital, and the roof was relatively flat, and I liked the place. They were wanting me to go to the right side, but there was some air conditioning vents and stuff there. And I was like, you know, I kind of like this left side a little bit better. So off to the left we go, able to put both skids onto the roof, but of course not full collective down. Still kept in that 7 to 8 FLI on the 145. So kind of light on the skids. We had, I think, Brian, did we say we were going to leave Jake on the roof to help load and Wayne on the roof? That's what we ended up doing, but I can't remember.
We did. That was my intention all the way along. Of course, we didn't know, going back to communications, it was sketchy at best with who they had coming, who they had requested, because they had requested, I guess they were reaching out, and somewhere along the way, the Tennessee National Guard was requested to respond also. Of course, we were all dealing with the same thing. We were waiting for weather. And we're closer than the National Guard. I'm pretty sure they came out of Knoxville, Tennessee, McGee Tyson. It's like most of the responses that we do, you don't trust every bit of information that you get, but you try to keep in mind of everything that was said. And I was kind of like Jeff, once we got down there, initially when we responded and actually got on scene, we didn't know what we were dealing with. We had no idea exactly where they were going to be set up, as far as direct communications to folks on the roof, we had none. They had some options of trying to go through to set up some communications. But at that point, none of them seemed to be practical to try to work through. It was more like, hey, you're going to see when the helicopter arrives and you're going to give us enough space. And they were I won't speak for Jeff, but my initial landing, so Jeff he landed rooftop first. We knew the roof was not structural. There was no rooftop pad. We made the pads. We had discussed in advance how we were going to communicate with each other, and that Jeff would go in first. And once he did, then basically my plan was to drop my one passenger, and my goal 100%, because I wasn't set up medically at all. I'm basically just a helicopter with seats, and I was going to drop the Jake that was riding with me, and I gave him one task. I said, make sure that you can get the patients or the victims into the helicopter, buckle them in if you can. Give me the thumbs up when you're ready for me to go. Other than them being as professional as they could, there was some, I don't know who landed you first, Jeff, but there was a swiftwater rescue personnel was on the rooftop that assisted me the first landing.
Nice.
Because this was not a wide open roof, as Jeff said. There were roof drains, roof vents, HVA systems, wires, antennas. But we were able to pick enough. There was a knee wall around the exterior of the building that was enough to get my stinger. So I had to be real careful about positioning my tail. Jeff, the EC-145, the tail rotor's really high. So that wasn't really an issue for him. The first iteration was me hanging out overhead. I could see Jeff was on the deck. And those folks were, by the look of it, I don't know how else to say this, but they looked doomed. They needed us at this point. And as much as I think they had folks there that were trying to assist them, there were way more people there that were just pure victims. They needed to be moved. And that's where we came in.
Listening to the news reports in the interview with one of the victims that was trapped up there, she basically said they were panicked. She said,
"Oh yeah,
before you guys arrived, that they're watching the water rise in the building, and they've got about 10 feet to go before they're going to be overwhelmed and swept away by the floodwaters." So I can picture what you're saying with the look of panic in these patients, these rescue, the folks you're going to rescue, and in their faces. You talk about all the obstructions you've got on the rooftop, and also you talk about the winds, and how turbulent that is, and how difficult it is not only to land in that area with no wind or wind that's in your favor, but gusting winds that are not in your favor, and how difficult that must have been. And I think about, you guys and all your experience, you were probably the two most perfect people for this mission to go in and utilize all the training experience over the course of your career to go in there and be a part of this. So thank God that you were the two that were, selected by God that day to go and respond. That's amazing.
While we're at this landing, can you talk about how, with you, Brian, it was Jake with you, and Jake is a pilot. Is that correct?
He is a recent addition to aviation. He was in the process of just completing all of his ratings.
Okay, good.
So he actually wasn't even certified at the time.
Gotcha.
In my aircraft, but was clearly plenty comfortable being around the aircrafts and capable of the task at hand.
So let's talk about that for a minute. Brian, talk about Jake and how he changed from kind of a co-pilot, not certified yet, but kind of a co-pilot into a crew chief with the touchdown. And then Jeff, I'd like you to talk about how your crew assisted you with touching down on a non-helipad with multiple obstacles. So Brian, talk about that crew coordination and how Jake helped you, and then Jeff to the paramedic and the nurse, how they helped you. Go ahead.
Jake's he's a sharp young man, and but I knew he was very limited in his experience. So for him to be able to switch gears and be as professional as he could have been, honestly. And I tell you, those folks, we put them in harm's way when we dropped them off. In hindsight, they were in extreme danger. At the time, you think the building's going to always maintain its integrity, and we can do these pickups after we got settled in doing that. Those folks were in extreme danger because, like was explained earlier, everything you can name was coming downriver. And we were watching it come. And at that point, I'm guessing, Jeff, maybe the water was 2/3 of the way up this one-story building. Every window in the building was underwater. So for Jake to be able to jump off and clearly be able to take the task on of making sure that we got, I started with 3. I picked up 3 ambulatory patients from the hospital first, just to test everything out. Eventually, the next rotation, I started picking up 4, and I would ask him I'd give him the number. I want 3. I told him the first time, I want 3 on board, all in the back. I made the decision early not to put anybody up front with me, even though I had an empty seat.
Yeah, smart. That's smart.
The collective was way too close for a first-time flyer.
Yes.
I had my hands full. I was working. We were working that day up front. I didn't need anybody ending up over in my lap.
And Jake ended up on the roof, just staying with the
he
people.
Stayed on the roof all the way till the end, as did one of, and Jake is a trooper pilot. Jeff had dropped Wayne Carroll, who is a medic nurse, and they both stayed on the rooftop the entire time.
Jeff, could you talk about how your crew helped you on that first set down, and how I imagine, I mean, you're working a lot of medevac, obviously, so they certainly have some training in landing and assisting you, but this is different than landing in a field with maybe an electric line out there at 50 yards. This is very unique. How did they help you on the fly? What did you tell them that you wanted from them, and how did it all work?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Technisonic Communications. Technisonic Communications is a proud provider of the critical airborne communications equipment utilized every day on every mission. Law enforcement, EMS, forestry, federal and military operators all trust their communications to Technisonic. Visit TIL.ca to learn how Technisonic can support your mission communications. Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit Airbus.com for more information. Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety.
As we wrap up this episode, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Virginia State Police pilots Jeff Bush and Brian Canada for sharing their extraordinary experiences during Hurricane Helene. Their heroic efforts in rescuing 54 individuals from a hospital overwhelmed by floodwaters showcases the critical role of helicopter aviation in disaster response and the unwavering dedication of first responders in the face of adversity. We hope this conversation has shed light on the intricate decision-making and teamwork that goes into such life-saving missions. The challenges faced by these brave men and women remind us of the importance of communication, collaboration, and preparation in high-pressure situations. If you'd like to dive deeper into this remarkable mission, be sure to check out Lisa Gordon's captivating article at verticalmag.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Hangar Z podcast, where we honor the dedication and courage of those who serve in aviation and public safety. Remember to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with others who appreciate the incredible impacts of aviation in our communities.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.